The End of the World is a prescient episode right now for a few reasons. Firstly, and most obviously, this spring has been the 20th anniversary of NuWho, and I felt it would be wise to mark it by looking at its second ever episode. I can't look at its first because I'd already done it. 20 years is a long-ass time. By contrast, in the year NuWho premiered, Colin Baker's first season was celebrating its 20th anniversary. That Eccleston's tenure is now halfway between then and now. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't a little disconcerting. Of course, for those of my age who are fans of Doctor Who, it makes 2 decades since most of us first saw the show, and therefore just shows me how much of my life I've been thinking about this stupid science fiction show about an alien in a wooden box, but nevertheless, here we are. More importantly though, it allows me to contrast Doctor Who of 2005 with Doctor Who of 2025. The former a bold and triumphant return to television, exceeding expectations in terms of its popularity, and taking its rightful place as a vital part of Saturday tea time television. The latter, well, the promises of grand reinvention and expansion popularity have fallen flat, and the show faces all-time low ratings and probably even lower cultural relevance. Whereas in 2005 we saw the show's rebirth and promise that the cancellation was only temporary, here we're faced with a stark realisation that it may well have been a revival that ended up being temporary as well. This episode is apt for comparison for 2 reasons. Firstly, because while overall it's a pretty crap episode, it nevertheless does the job it's meant to reintroduce a brand new audience to Doctor Who. In a way, its job was even more important than that of Rose, because while that episode had to introduce the show to new viewers, this one had to show the new viewers the kind of thing they could expect to see every week. And while, as I said, this episode is not very good, it at least does show a huge variety of aliens and enemies, showing us what we can expect to see, and the Doctor saving the day in the manner he often does. It shows us the kind of adventures we might expect. And while one of my major criticisms of it is that it's lifeless and generic and, well, feels like a first draft, let's be honest, given this is supposed to be a demonstrator for that kind of story, it at least does its job of showing the viewer what it's meant to be. Compared with RTD's second go, and then, well, if you ignore the 60th anniversary stuff, which was packed with fan service and callbacks and all stuff that would be impenetrable to a new fan, so clearly they're meant to start with shooty, you get singing goblins and then talking babies. Which would prove to any new viewer that Doctor Who is a show that revels in its own stupidity and idiocy, and will never touch a show with a barge pole again. This is all stuff I'll discuss in more detail in a bit. The other reason for this episode is apt for a comparison is that, well, in 2005, Doctor Who triumphantly took its place as the king of Saturday tea time family entertainment, and in hindsight it's pretty obvious that the mid to late noughties was the last time this was something that could have been done. Media consumption has changed beyond recognition over the last 10 years or so. The sitting down of an evening to watch what's on television is beyond dead, as the rise of the internet and streaming have all rendered it beyond the relevant. It's important to note that the drop in Doctor Who's ratings that many believe appear to be terminal actually started in the Moffat era, but there have been peaks and troughs since then. The last series to consistently get ratings in the 6 and 7 millions was the first Whittaker series, the rest of that era usually getting 4s and 5s, and now there's been an even further drop into the Galway era with 3s and 4s, showing that while it started in the mid-2010s, the drop has been over the... While it started in the mid-2010s, the real drop has been over the last 5 years or so, so yes, one instance in which I'm not going to blame Moffat. It's pretty obvious why. What remained of family viewing then has since been obliterated by Fortnite and TikTok after all. Doctor Who is trying to cater to an audience, frankly, doesn't really exist anymore. I've said it before that even if the classic series had survived beyond 1989, it would not have lasted long in the 90s with the way that TV changed in that decade. Arguably, NuWho has found out what doing that would have been like, as it has not been able to adapt to the way TV has changed going into the 2020s. But it's often said ratings matter less nowadays. Even the biggest show on TV rarely get above 6-7 million these days, and remember that's what was considered normal for a show like Doctor Who 10 years ago, which only was at the very top of the list a few select times. But I think the bigger problem is actually that Doctor Who's cultural relevance has also collapsed. The great Disney streaming deal that had turned the show into a Star Wars level sci-fi phenomenon has gone absolutely nowhere, with the Disney money seemingly going away after this series, and thus the future of the show is in doubt. And well, that's because the show built no buzz, and that's because the first 2 episodes were singing goblins and talking babies. The traditional family audience is gone, and the attempt to build a new one was squandered by those failures. This is why the comparison with NuWho's beginning is important. The original RTD era faced challenges in re-establishing Doctor Who's traditional place as family entertainment, and equally re-establishing its cultural relevance, and it succeeded at both, thanks to a start that, while frequently very shaky on the creative front, nevertheless did the right things to capture and keep the audience. RTD2 faced challenges in moving beyond Doctor Who's traditional place in the new media environment, and recapturing at least some of the cultural relevance that has been slowly lost over the last decade, and because of a few key choices it has failed to do so. It increasingly looks like this will be the show's last series for some time as a result. As for the end of the world itself, well, it's not very good. As I said, it's pretty shallow and simplistic, more designed to show off the alien designs than to actually tell much of a story. It's not awful and has a few effective character beats, but they're mostly drowned out by lame ideas, awkward exposition, and undeveloped story. It might do its job in showing off the alien world of Doctor Who, but that's really about all it does. And as we'll find out shortly, it doesn't even really do that right, does it? This episode was directed by Euros Lyn, the first of many episodes he did. Lyn tended to be rather creative, is maybe the word I'd use for it if I was being charitable. I'm not being charitable though, so the word I'm actually going to use is gimmicky. Well, I can say this episode does not escape this particular issue at all. Yes, it is his first episode, but even so, the utterly ridiculous finale where the Doctor goes all slow-mo and teleports through a Galaxy Quest blade stands out for me of how ridiculous it looks, and where it just sort of provides a perfect cap on the episode in that respect. As well as having those over-the-top moments, there's also silly moments. The way that the blue woman is awkwardly pulled into the vent just looks ridiculous. And there's also a general malaise throughout the story, which manifests itself into like a pretty bad lack of urgency. The script doesn't help, but a companion being in mortal danger and the Doctor desperately trying to save her has rarely felt quite so dull. The performances also feel off, even Eccleston's lines feel flat and bland sometimes, and I've said before that I think he got a hand on the character basically instantly, so I don't think it's his fault. I'm willing to put it on Lyn. So yeah, unfortunately there's not much for me to go on here, and when it's not silly and gimmicky, it's just lethargic and lifeless instead. The rest of the production also doesn't do brilliantly. The alien designs are uniformly fantastic actually, really showing what the series could provide in terms of creatures, and almost all done with impressive practical effects. Now, why is this a bad thing, you're asking? Well, rather notoriously, RTD spent most of the series effects budget on this one episode. Yeah, so yes, these do look quite good, but anything would when you blow the entire series budget on it. So whatever points they gain for visuals, they lose it for piss-poor budget management that made much of the rest of the series 1 look, well, let's not beat around the bush, pretty bloody cheap. Boomtown only exists because they had film in Cardiff using existing props for the square is a fuck all. And that was because of this. As for the rest of the effects, well, the CGI has not aged well, but then what CGI from this period has? The set design itself is a bit bland. It does feel like the Doctor and Rose have landed in like a conference centre at some times. And honestly, that's about it for the production. I don't really have much to say about it. So, yeah, it's not great, and what was great about it was only achieved through incompetent budgeting. So, welcome to NuWho. Anyway, Russell himself wrote this script, as if the lame pop culture references didn't clue you in, and I'll start with a few positives, and as I said, there are some. It's not awful. It's just, well, they're usually followed by a but, as that's just how it can be with NuWho like this. Anyway, as I said, the main point of this episode was to show new viewers to Doctor Who the kind of thing they could be expecting to see as the series went on. In concept, it actually does this nearly flawlessly. Massive time travel, an event that all the viewers will be able to identify with, lots of weird and wonderful aliens to show the variety of the universe, and for the Doctor it's a mystery to solve and a villain to defeat. The idea of this episode in terms of achieving that goal is excellent, no question, and certainly leagues above the Doctor drops a giant goblin on a church. I like that it's managing to show all these elements. Its portrayal on the screen is mixed, it feels pretty blatant during the parade of the alien scene, but honestly I think a bit of indulgence there, it's not the biggest sin. And the feeling that this is a new experience the audience is supposed to be viewing, well, I think that does successfully come across. Another thing it gets right is the Doctor's character. Admittedly, some of the dialogue and the direction doesn't help here. I want to like this stuff more than I do because of that. And while I have to admit it's clouded by my overall dislike of the idea of the Time War, while it did result in good character stuff a lot of the time, particularly in Series 1, a lot of the stuff ended up feeling repetitive as the show went on, and none of it overcomes how much of a mistake I thought it was narratively and how it hamstrung the series in many ways, but that's very much a discussion for another time, which may well be soon, especially because of its relevance to the current series, with RTD falling back into his comfort zone with the last of the Time Lord stuff, but I digress. Today we're just looking at this arc in this episode, and overall I think it does work, albeit far more in conception than it does in execution. As an idea it's great. As Rose gets more into the TARDIS thing, she obviously wants to know more, and pushing at buttons the Doctor does not want pushed as a result. This is effective in two ways. Firstly in that it creates a small mystery for the viewer, and as we don't find out why the Doctor is his nads in a twist over this until the very end. It's obviously something significant, but I like that it leaves the reason he's acting as he is about it as something for the audience to question and guess. The second way is that it informs us a lot about the Doctor. Remembering that this is very early on, the new viewers will still be getting a grip on this mysterious man. It tells us he's elusive, impatient, and clearly hiding some very deep wounds, and what I especially like about it is it does it simply. Just a few scenes and a few lines of dialogue establish all we need to know, which is a refreshing change from how this episode usually handles things. Unfortunately, this is undermined somewhat by the episode's haphazard nature. The moments establishing this character stuff are hurt by weak dialogue, and it's not carried throughout the story as well as it should be. The Doctor rattling off exposition and reacting in pretty subdued ways to various things, notably the Rose in Trouble scene where he says to a companion in mortal danger that he's going to save her in 2 ticks, which really gives the impression of someone who doesn't really give a shit rather than someone racked by guilt and desperately trying to atone for it. It's unfortunate the episode fell back onto its bad habits to undermine otherwise good stuff. Other good stuff, I like the phone call scene. Rose's relationship with Jackie is an important part of the series, and just having a moment to explore it is nice. It's a neat moment where we contrast the enormousness of the moment Rose is experiencing and the undertaking she has taken on by travelling with the Doctor versus the vital importance of normal relationships with the people that matter most. In an episode where the need to explain everything is usually felt, just having a quiet moment that lets normal interactions do the talking is very welcome. As for the rest of the episode, well, it's not great, is it? I feel like, in utterly typical NuWho fashion, RTD got caught up in the style of the episode rather than the substance. And don't get me wrong, the style was important, as I've said. It was to get the new viewers in on the series and the way it would do things, but the substance was also quite important, and it is neglected. The story is weak, the characters lame, the structure poor, and it just doesn't work and come together. Starting with the story, the plot is pretty simplistic. Now, this isn't necessarily a bad thing in itself. Indeed, having a simple plot you build from is a good way to make proper use of the 45 minutes format sometimes. But this episode doesn't bother building up from that simple plot. The end of the world itself is a backdrop and nothing else, very little commentary on what effect that we would have on the characters or what it would symbolically mean for the human race. What we do get is this episode's number one problem: dry exposition replacing natural development. Rose pretty much says right out exactly how she feels and what the audience should think. The same is for her reaction to the characters. This should be a huge moment for her, seeing all these new aliens and learning, after her experience with an S-Teen, the variety of the universe and how these aliens can be good as well as bad. That's a simplistic way of putting it, but you know what I mean. And instead we get, you guessed it, dry exposition. Rose tells us how she feels. Her conversation with Blue Girl was about as unnatural as it could possibly sound, for instance. And there's also the murder mystery. That could have been a great lynch point of the episode, as it's something Doctor Who can do very well. Perhaps it could have gone for echoes of the robots of death or something. No, mystery gets the bare minimum of screen time and it's pretty bloody obvious who it is from moment one. Could it be all the pleasant and sociable aliens, or is it the bitchy trampoline that has verbally treated everyone else like total dirt? I'm on the edge of my seat here to find out, or at least I'm on the edge of my seat here because that means when it's over, I can sit up and go away more quickly. Then there's just bizarre moments. In the directing bit I spoke about the ending with the stupid Galaxy Quest type fan blades, and then the bizarre moment where the Doctor teleports through one of the fans. Now, admittedly, the direction is very bad here and it's not really clear what's happening, but on paper it's stupid as well. The Doctor works up the courage to dodge a fan blade, when he's already dodged like 2 or 3 in order to get to this point. And there's also a lot of silly moments as well. Why exactly does a life-saving sun shield even have an off button? And the Doctor warns Jade that because she's made of wood, she'll be burnt up. Yes, the temperatures where the Doctor mentioned are at 5,000 degrees. Anything would be burnt up at 5,000 degrees. I don't think her being made of wood is going to make much of a difference. It's just silliness like that that screams sloppiness to me. Then there's the characters, but frankly there's not really that much to say here. Most of the aliens are complete blank slates who barely have anything to do. The Mox of Balhoun is a fantastic practical effect, sure, but one that was not costed properly, I can but repeat. But all he does is squeal and die. We found out nothing about him or any of the others. Only Jabe has any real screen time, but she has no real character. Just helps the Doctor and dies because RTD likes killing characters for no discernible reason. Although at least Clive's death in the previous episode made a bit of sense as adding depth to the danger of the situation. Plenty of people have already died in this one, so Jabe's just feels a bit cruel. Also, a walking, talking, sentient tree. Really? I mean, yes, I'm asking for scientific realism from the Blue Box Time Machine series, but I have my limits and this is pushing them. Especially with her weird Spider-Man powers, but I digress. Then there's the villain of the piece, Cassandra. Now, as I mentioned, the murder mystery stuff is very lame, and it's obvious from moment one she's the bad guy because, well, she's more or less the only candidate. Could it be all these pleasant sociable aliens, or this stuck-up cow? You guess. Her motivations are weak and confused. She wants money and a silly, overcomplicated villain plan, but it's also like a commentary about cosmetic surgery, if by commentary you mean Russell saying it exists and is probably bad. I honestly can't say what he's trying to go for here by have her be the last human and so so unhuman-like. I could come up with a few answers, but honestly, I can't really be asked. The trampoline honestly is a bit disconcerting to me, and not in the this enhances the story kind of way, like with Davros, for instance. It's in a yuck, I don't even want to look at that thing kind of way. She also just doesn't really come across as threatening or even that villainous, just, a bit of a bitch, and that's it. And then, of course, her death. Once the Doctor had teleported her back, Oh, by the way, they make a huge stink about teleporters not being allowed, and then it's a huge thing that Cassandra has a teleporter, which nobody bothered checking for. They were working on the honour system then, I take it. Anyway, once she's back, and she does the I would have got away for it if it wasn't for you meddling kids routine, then boasts about how she'll use legal trickery to avoid justice. She then starts drying out, and the Doctor refuses to help her, and, well, the outcome is kaboom, as you can probably guess. This is a sign of the episode's approach. In theory, the Doctor's reaction to this should be a good way to add to his character arc. A choice between letting her die and letting her escape without any real chance of justice, well, it's an interesting one for the Doctor at this point. Now, I do think most of us would choose the second one in this scenario, because becoming judge, jury, and executioner is unconscionable for most people. But the Doctor immediately post-Time War is not most people. It's understandable why he'd be tempted, and I think exploring this, even in the brief moments this scene has, would have been more interesting. Well, no, instead we get the Doctor having already made up his mind and letting her kaboom. It's more than a bit disconcerting he's happy to let her die. Yes, she's a bad person, and yes, she's not going to face justice otherwise, but I don't kind of get the feeling that this is just straight up murder, and it's a lot worse than stuff like Shock Eye. That was pure self-defense. This? Here he teleported her back, seemingly in full knowledge of what would happen. It's less the morality of it and more how it's just done straight up without any exploration of it at all. I know ITV thinks he's doing a harder, more ruthless Doctor, but he's not. He's just doing a shallower black and white Doctor. Most of the arc is handled better than this, but I don't like this scene at all. As for the rest of the episode, well, the structure and pacing is bad. It feels like nothing happens for 20 minutes and the rest of the episode goes on at a lightning pace. Perhaps the standing around talking about the aliens at the start of the episode could have been reduced just a tad, so the finale could have been a bit more involved in Galaxy Quest fans. Also, the structure is just bad, the setups are always just endless dry exposition, everything gets explained in great detail rather than shown or being allowed to develop naturally. It genuinely feels like halfway through the episode all we fucking had is things being explained. Gotta explain about the time travel, about the end of the world, and about the aliens, and explain why NuWho has to fucking be like this. It feels just confused and unfocused. That's the problem really. It's an idea that should work, but it's let down in the execution, and most of the problems I've mentioned come back to that. The episode just feels a bit sloppy, and it's a good sign that with the dry exposition setting everything up, then the silly moments resolving them. It's annoying because the good ideas in the episode, not least its role in bringing new people to the world of Doctor Who, deserve praise. It's the execution where it falls short. So why was it the case that this episode's shortcomings did not matter when it came to developing the show's new audience and allowing Doctor Who to grow as it did, when the shortcomings of the first episode of the current era more or less killed whatever chance the series had stone dead? Well, firstly, as I've said, the concept of this episode was very good in demonstrating Doctor Who to a new audience. Spaceship, aliens, action, adventure, mystery, and all that. God knows it wasn't executed very well, as I've just made very clear, but it's easy to see how someone might have watched that thinking, well, it was a bit naff, but I like the idea of it. And thus they'd stick around for better episodes as they came along. And have to sit through Aliens of London World War III as well, but never mind. For the new era, on the other hand, well, we get singing goblins, and confused time travel shenanigans that would make a new viewer wonder what the fuck they accidentally smoked before they started watching, but also give them the idea that this is a stupid show that throws insane shit at the wall to see what sticks. And anyone who bothered sticking around would have had that confirmed to them by talking babies and snot monsters. Whatever at the end of the world's faults, it is grounded and manages to keep it a consistent idea of what Doctor Who should be. The first episode of this new era failed to do that. It made Doctor Who seem stupid, an idiotic show with idiotic premises, and not a show that it could deliver mystery, adventure, emotion, and all that. I mean, let me make it clear, God knows the show should not always take itself 100% seriously, but if you want to do stupid and silly concepts, for God's sake don't put it in the first two episodes, and even more for God's sake execute it better than that. Series 1, which has some bad episodes to be sure, delivers a huge variety of styles and nevertheless maintains what the show is consistently. As for the new one, well, if you manage to stick around after those first two episodes, you then get Doctor Who versus music, and, well, honestly, I think in terms of pure quality, that one might even be worse than the first two, but never mind. There's just no consistency about it, no sign on what the show is about and what to expect. I think this was the problem on the creative side. Then perhaps a bigger problem was that in 2005 it was still easy to imagine a family sitting around a TV of an evening, and Doctor Who, perhaps almost inadvertently, filled a perfectly shaped hole in the schedule at that time. It didn't matter how some of the episodes were crap because it had an immediate built-in audience that would happily sit there and watch for family entertainment. This does not exist anymore. The rise of the internet and the prevalence of activities like video gaming and the rise of streaming and all that mostly killed it, and then TikTok and the like finished it off entirely. I do sound a bit like an old boomer complaining about how things back in my day were better, but the kids of today aren't sitting around in front of the TV like this. This audience doesn't exist anymore. Now, I'm not saying no kids will ever be watching, but if you do want kids to watch, they have to watch it on their own accord. They all have their iPads and they can all go on iPlayer themselves. The quality of the episodes simply did not give them that motivation. I know exactly what I would have thought of the Church on Ruby Road and Space Babies between the ages 7 and 12, and I would have thought they were stupid and not bothered with the show again. But then again, perhaps Doctor Who is just at a low point of its cultural relevance, and this matters more than anything else. It's always had peaks and troughs, but we're on a long and steady decline, arguably since the 50th anniversary really, and the show has become just less and less relevant from since then. One needs to look at Last Christmas. Christmas is of course the only remaining time where the whole family sitting around the TV thing still happens. Doctor Who managed a pathetic rating, while other cultural giants like Wallace and Gromit and Gavin and Stacey absolutely buried it. Doctor Who was clearly at the point on Christmas Day where everyone went off to have Christmas dinner, and well, that says a lot about how the show is viewed now. And it's not as if Doctor Who is some lesser part of this country's popular culture than those mentioned shows. If you were doing a montage of well-known British entertainment properties, putting Gromit next to a Dalek would make perfect sense. But Wallace and Gromit was returned to the screen for the first time in 15 years, in a highly anticipated feature-length movie that built on the admiration the series had built up in the intervening years. Doctor Who is just part of the furniture now and has been for too long. Eventually you get bored of that old sofa. And, well, perhaps the show really does need a rest to truly reset the fatigue. Either way, it looks like Disney don't want to cough up any more cash and is probably getting that rest whatever anyone thinks, and thus, NuWho is bookended by 2 attempts to bring the show to a new audience. One successful, one failed, and, well, I hope I've made clear why I think why. Anyway, final score for the end of the world is 4 out of 10. It's slightly below average for NuWho. It's not awful, it has a few small good moments, and indeed its main purpose of demonstrating the show to a new audience is something it succeeds at, but it feels sloppily thought out. Too much dry exposition and not enough depth to it. It just feels like a draft or two away from actually being good, but why do that when you can replace it with Britney Spears songs, am I right? Overall, it's not a good episode, but it does demonstrate how as long as you can get the important thing right, in this case demonstrating what Doctor Who can be, then it can be a success anyway. This episode, therefore, goes in the win column despite its quality not being very high, and well, I won't repeat myself anymore about how that success was not repeated recently. As I said at the start, this is a prescient as we go past 20 years of NuWho, and perhaps approach its end too.